Hello everyone, welcome to my little hometown street right next to my house. This is a pullback of the macro image that I'm going to be editing tonight, and I just wanted to give you a little context because a lot of times macro are very hard to backwards engineer. When you're looking at a picture, it's really hard to get the context of where a picture was taken, so I thought I'd shoot a pullback. So I was just on the sidewalk here shooting this little bush that has some leaves that are coming out, and I captured a couple of images. Now I wanted to go with, let's see, I was probably shooting the branch right here or here. I was standing on this side shooting in this direction where the sun was setting, and so I purposely underexposed because I wanted to capture this really rich sunset color. And as you can see when I zoom in, these little veins here are popping up. And this is what I really like to see in images. Now this is really dark. If you look at the histogram over here, you're going to see that while the histogram is spread across the entire area that is available, right here the main star of the show, if you will, is kind of dark. So we're going to work on opening some of those shadows. So I don't do a lot to macro if they're sharp like this. This is a raw file and I think it's quite pretty as it is. Let me double check and make sure it's raw. Yep. Okay, so I'm working in Lightroom CC cloud version right now, and the reason I am is because my Lightroom classic desktop version is not working for whatever reason. It's not importing files, so I decided to go over to this one again. The control is not as refined in this program, but I can still do most of the things I would do over in the other program. So I'm going to open up the shadows a little bit. I'm working under the light panel, which would kind of correlate to the basic panel in the other program. So what I'm doing here is I'm not going to leave this like it is. I'm just getting a feel for what it looks like when I open the shadows. And it isn't nearly as dramatic as I'd like, but it does offer a little bit of brightening of this area. So I might do it a little bit, but I kind of like the moody aspect of it, so I really don't want to open it too much. So then I'm going to go over here to highlights, and again I'm watching this area because I might take this and turn it into a brush instead of a global adjustment. So I'm looking to see what happens, and I kind of like that. When I'm looking in this area, it brightens up the area in question. It also brightens this, which I don't like. And then we're going to check with whites. What do whites do? And that's pretty similar, but it does more effect up here than it does down here. Highlight seems to touch this area. So what we're going to do is grab our brush tool, and I'm going to zero it out, make sure that I don't have anything going on here. I'm going to grab maybe a little bit of exposure and possibly some highlights here, and I am going to paint it over the little bits of leaves that are illuminated. And the reason I'm doing this is because this only affects the highlights, more or less. I do have a little bit of exposure on there, but it just adds some, it separates these from the background. So I've continued on using the brush tool a little bit more, and the last thing that I have done here is added a little bit of clarity. Now I like to add clarity. It really makes things punchy. When you paint on clarity, it's mid-tone contrast, and mid-tone contrast means that the midtones are going to be separated. Normal contrast makes the highlights push farther away from the darkest darks. So you have the things that are most contrasty pushing apart. With mid-tone contrast, we have the middle area, the often texture, pores, the weave of clothing, things like that are going to become more punchy. You're going to see more detail, and in this case it's getting a little bit aggressive. It can make things really pop. This may look awfully aggressive, but what I've done is really kept the ratio of brightness to darkness the same, in that I brushed the effect over everything as opposed to just isolating this little leaf, which already was brighter than everything else to begin with. But I didn't want it to look like I pasted it in there, so I made sure that I was very careful to paint whatever I painted on this guy on everything else, so that it equally is, it's like, you know, all if you have an ocean, all boats rise at the same rate if they're next to each other. So I want all the variables to stay the same. I want the ratio of brightness to darkness to stay the same, but just intensify that contrast, make the darkers a little darker, make the highlights a little brighter in proportion to each other without looking completely unnatural. This actually right here looks very similar to how my eye saw it. Now, you know that a raw file, I'm just lowering the clarity just a little bit because it's a bit on the aggressive side there. Plus 17 looks a little better. When I was standing there photographing this, this is what it looked like to my eye. And this is a kind of a sister image taken at a similar time. And you see how sort of washed out the raw file is? It doesn't look like it did to my eye. This is really the kind of contrast that I was seeing with my eye as the light was really strongly backlit, illuminating these little leaves. So I'm really trying to get it back to the place where my eye saw it. So let's look here. Now, it looks like it's terribly bright, but you see that there isn't any haloing around because this was actually illuminated, as opposed to my taking a brush and artificially brightening it. All these little areas that are bright were actually that way, and that's what attracted me to it. And I'm going to leave this as it is. What you didn't see as I was doing brush work that takes a while, and I kind of sped through that and came back, one of the things that I did do was working in the light panel again. And what I did was added a little bit of vibrance, or no, what did I do? Nope, I took that off. Let's see here, what did I do? You know what? I took that off. So this is as it is. I thought I had pushed the saturation and the color, but in truth I had zeroed it back out before I started recording again. So just ignore that. So this is the shape of the light panel, just really basic shadow opening, lowering the whites, adding a touch of contrast, and then mostly brush work right here. That's really where Lightroom can shine, because you can really get in there and be very precise. And the recipe was more or less adding clarity, contrast, and pushing those highlights a little bit. All right, thank you. It's been wonderful having you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.